After my mother-in-law visited my house, I just realized her phone was left behind on the sofa. Because my mother-in-law's car was already far away, I decided to return it later tonight. But suddenly, the phone rang, and a photo of my husband, who died a year ago, appeared. When I opened the incoming message, I was shocked. My heart almost stopped. It turned out. Before the story begins, please write in the comments section which area you are watching this story from. Don't forget to like and subscribe so that Revenge with Jain can continue to grow and present even more interesting stories. Debbie saw Mrs. Sanders, her mother-in-law, to the front porch. The forced thin smile on Debbie's face felt stiff. It had been a year since her husband Andrew passed away. However, Mrs. Sanders's visit today felt heavier than usual. Her mother-in-law was acting too sweet. Her voice was made soft, but her eyes kept moving restlessly, as if watching something inside the house. Debbie, wearing a long, modest gray dress and headscarf, only nodded politely, trying to hide her discomfort. To her, this house was still full of memories of Andrew. Every corner reminded her of her husband's laughter and warmth, and Mrs. Sanders's presence felt like it was disturbing the fragile peace she was trying to rebuild. Debbie, take good care of yourself. If anything happens, call me, Mrs. Sanders said while adjusting the edge of her scarf, which was actually already neat. Yes, Mother. Be careful on the road, Debbie replied softly. From behind the steering wheel of the black sedan parked in the yard, Jim, Mrs. Sanders's private driver, bowed his head slightly as a sign of respect. Jim was Mrs. Sanders's confidant and had worked for her late husband's family for decades. Debbie saw Mrs. Sanders get into the car. The dark car window closed immediately, hiding her mother-in-law's expression. Not long after, the car moved slowly, leaving the yard, and then disappeared around the corner. Debbie let out a long breath, feeling a little relieved. She turned back, closed the front door, and locked it. She walked toward the living room, where they had just been chatting. Her intention was to clear away the teacups remaining on the table. However, her steps stopped. Her eyes were fixed on a shiny black rectangular object lying on a sofa pillow. It was a phone, clearly not hers. It was Mrs. Sanders's expensive phone. Debbie picked it up, and a sense of hesitation immediately gripped her. She ran back to the front door, opened it, and looked at the road. Mrs. Sanders's car was no longer visible. It must have been far away. Debbie went back inside. She placed the phone on the coffee table. Should she call Jim? But she didn't have the driver's number. Mrs. Sanders's other phone must also be in her other bag. Debbie decided to just keep it for now. Tonight, after dinner, she would deliver the phone to her mother-in-law's house located in the elite area across town. She didn't want to keep Mrs. Sanders's personal belongings for long. Debbie was about to go to the kitchen to wash the cups when the phone on the table suddenly vibrated violently. The screen lit up, accompanied by a loud ringtone. Debbie was startled. She stared at the phone, and then all the blood in her body felt like it froze. Her heart felt as if it were being squeezed. On the phone screen, a photo of Andrew, her husband, was clearly displayed. That photo was Debbie's favorite. Andrew was smiling broadly, wearing his favorite blue shirt, taken while they were on vacation at the beach a year before the accident. Debbie's mind was in chaos. Why was Mrs. Sanders using Andrew's photo as a contact photo? The ringing stopped, but Debbie's heart was still pounding. She thought it might just be an alarm, or maybe Mrs. Sanders saved someone's number with Andrew's photo as a memory. Debbie tried to dismiss the bad thoughts. She sat on the sofa, trying to calm herself. She straightened her headscarf slightly, trying to ward off the cold sensation that suddenly crept down her neck. Not even a minute passed before the phone lit up again. This time it didn't ring, just a short vibration indicating an incoming message. Debbie glanced at the screen. Her eyes widened. The message came from the same contact, a contact saved under the name Andrew. An overwhelming curiosity, mixed with a strange fear, overcame her politeness. Debbie remembered that Mrs. Sanders had once told her the phone's lock pattern during an emergency at the hospital, just in case something happened. Debbie wasn't sure if the pattern was still the same. Her trembling hand touched the screen. She tried drawing the simple star pattern she remembered. The screen opened. Debbie swallowed hard. She opened the messaging app. There at the very top was a conversation with the name Andrew. She opened the latest message that had just arrived, and as her eyes read the lines of sentences, her world felt like it collapsed for the second time. Her breath caught in her throat, and her heart felt as if it stopped beating. The message read, "The hush money has been received. The accident secret is safe with me. Don't forget next month's transfer." Debbie sat weakly on the floor. Mrs. Sanders's phone slipped from her grasp, falling onto the shaggy carpet. Her body trembled violently. The room that had felt peaceful now felt so cold and suffocating. Accident, that word repeated in her head. Hush money. That phrase was like a sledgehammer hitting her consciousness. For a whole year, Debbie lived in the belief that Andrew died purely because of a single vehicle accident. Brake failure. His car lost control on a downhill road and hit a barrier. The police had closed the case as a pure disaster. But this message changed everything. This message implied there was a secret behind the accident. Something that had to be kept tightly shut with money. And the sender of this message used her husband's name, Andrew. Who was it? Why was Mrs. Sanders, Andrew's own mother, involved in paying this hush money? Debbie picked the phone back up. Her hands were still trembling, but now another feeling emerged beneath the shock and grief. Anger. Debbie began to think fast. She remembered Mrs. Sanders's strange behavior over the past year. After Andrew's funeral, Mrs. Sanders did look devastated, but behind her grief, her movements were so fast and efficient. Too efficient. Before 40 days had even passed, Mrs. Sanders was already busy processing Andrew's massive life insurance payout. Mrs. Sanders was also the one who immediately took control of Andrew's real estate company, claiming Debbie didn't understand business and was still too young. Debbie, who at the time was drowning in a sea of grief, could only surrender and sign all the documents presented to her. She thought her mother-in-law just wanted to help her. But now, all that kindness felt like a mask. With her breath still hitching, Debbie braced herself. She had to know more. This was her only chance before Mrs. Sanders realized her phone was missing. She opened the phone again. She had to find other clues. First, she checked the call history. Sure enough, there were many incoming and outgoing calls to the number saved as Andrew. This wasn't just casual talk. This was intense communication. Debbie then switched to the photo gallery. She had to hold back nausea while looking at family photos that seemed happy. Photos of Andrew's graduation, family vacation photos, and photos of Mrs. Sanders smiling while hugging her son. Everything looked normal. Debbie kept scrolling down, past hundreds of photos. She almost gave up until she finally found something unusual, tucked among photos of food. It was a screenshot of a bank transfer from a banking app. Debbie's heart pounded again. She enlarged the image. It was proof of a transfer to a bank account under a very foreign name, Tabitha Masters. The amount made Debbie gasp. $250 million, not a small sum. In the transfer description column, it was clearly written, Coastal Project Consultation Fee. What project? As far as Debbie knew, Andrew's company was not working on any project in a coastal area. This was strange. Debbie immediately took a photo of the screenshot using her own phone. She went back to the main menu of Mrs. Sanders's phone. She opened the contact list, searched for the name Andrew, pressed the number, copied it, and saved it to her own phone. She also copied the bank account number under the name Tabitha Masters. She had to find out who this woman was. Was Tabitha the same person as Andrew, the message sender? While Debbie was busy copying all that important information, Mrs. Sanders's phone in her hand suddenly vibrated and rang again. The name Andrew appeared on the screen. Debbie jumped in surprise. She panicked. Should she answer it? If she stayed silent, the sender would be suspicious. If she spoke, her voice would definitely be recognized as not Mrs. Sanders. The ringing continued, breaking the silence of the house. Debbie made a split-second decision. With a trembling hand, she pressed the green button to accept the call and immediately pressed the speakerphone button so she wouldn't have to hold the phone to her ear. Debbie held her breath. She didn't say a single word. There was a moment of silence on the other end, only the sound of calm breathing. Then a voice was heard. It wasn't Andrew's voice. It was a woman's voice, cold, sharp, clear, and full of confidence. "What is it, Mrs. Sanders? Why call again? Afraid the secret will leak." Debbie immediately disconnected the call. Her hands were clenched tight. She knew now this was a dangerous game. Her husband was murdered, and the woman on the phone just now knew exactly what happened. Debbie threw the phone onto the sofa. Her heart was beating so fast it felt like it wanted to jump out of her chest. That woman's voice, cold, sharp, and in control, kept echoing in her ears. Afraid the secret will leak. So, Mrs. Sanders, her own mother-in-law, had a secret with this woman. A secret about Andrew's accident. Debbie's legs felt weak. She had to sit down. The living room that had felt comfortable earlier now felt like a prison. She stared at Mrs. Sanders's phone with a mixture of fear and hatred. That object was a Pandora's box she had just opened. For a few minutes, Debbie just sat in silence. Tears began to well up. The grief she had been trying to bury was now rising again with a different face. Not grief from loss, but grief from betrayal. Did Andrew know? Was Andrew intentionally taken away from her? Wild thoughts began to emerge. Debbie shook her head hard, trying to drive away the suspicions. She couldn't break down now. She had to focus. She had to know who the woman behind that voice was. She had to know what really happened to Andrew. Debbie took a deep breath, trying to calm the shaking in her hands. She picked up Mrs. Sanders's phone again. She knew she couldn't call back. Her voice would be recognized. The only way was through messages. She had to lure the woman out. She had to meet her. But how? That woman was clearly not an ordinary person. She had to have a strong reason. Debbie remembered the transfer screenshot. $250 million. Coastal project consultation fee. And that woman earlier mentioned Mrs. Sanders's name. This was a business relationship clearly being hidden. Debbie decided to use money as bait. She had to pretend to be Mrs. Sanders. She opened the messaging app, entered the conversation with the contact Andrew, and her still trembling hands began to type. The next transfer like this will be problematic. There is a sudden audit at the bank. I can't send money through the account. Debbie stopped for a moment, thinking. That sentence sounded convincing enough. She had to make it sound more urgent. We must meet. I will prepare cash. Bring all the documents you have regarding that coastal project. I want to check them. Debbie added the last sentence so that the meeting would look like normal business, not panic over a secret. She pressed the send button. Her heart pounded waiting for a reply. It felt like waiting for a sentence. In less than 30 seconds, the phone vibrated. A reply came. How unusual. Not like the usual. Is Mother afraid? Debbie felt a chill run down her spine. This woman was very sharp. Don't ask too many questions. This is urgent. Can you or not? Debbie typed, trying to mimic Mrs. Sanders's arrogant and uncompromising tone. A reply came again. I can. Where? When? Debbie felt a little relieved. Her bait worked. She had to choose a place, somewhere crowded, open, but where she could observe without being too noticeable. The Grand Pearl Hotel lobby, 4 p.m. this afternoon. Don't be late. Fine. Make sure the money is ready, the woman replied. The conversation ended. Debbie put the phone down. It was 1 p.m. She had 3 hours to prepare. She didn't know what she would face. She was going to meet someone who might be involved in her husband's death. She was terrified, but her determination to find the truth was much greater. She got up and went to her room. She couldn't come as Debbie, Andrew's grieving wife. She chose the most inconspicuous clothes, a long plain brown dress paired with a matching long, modest headscarf, clothes that would allow her to blend in. She took large framed sunglasses and a black medical mask. With these, most of her face would be covered. She put her own phone and Mrs. Sanders's phone into a simple sling bag. She ordered a regular taxi instead of using her own car so as not to be tracked. Exactly at 3:30 p.m., Debbie was already sitting on one of the sofas in a corner of the Grand Pearl Hotel lobby. The lobby was busy. The sound of people chatting and piano music could be heard. Her heart was thumping in her chest. She ordered a glass of warm tea but didn't touch it at all. Her hands under the table were clenched tight. She observed everyone who entered through the revolving door. At exactly 4 p.m., a woman stepped in. She was very different from what Debbie had imagined. The woman was still young, maybe only a few years older than her. She was very elegant, her hair in a modern bun. Her steps were full of confidence in a silk blouse and expensive fabric trousers. She carried a branded handbag. She stopped for a moment in the middle of the lobby, her sharp eyes observing the surroundings. She took out her phone as if about to make a call. Debbie held her breath. The woman looked in her direction. Debbie quickly looked down, pretending to check her own phone, but it was too late. The woman began walking toward her. Her steady footsteps were clearly audible on the marble floor. Debbie felt her whole body go stiff. The woman stopped right in front of her table. Debbie didn't dare raise her head. Silence for a moment. Then the woman gave a small laugh, a cold and mocking laugh. Your disguise game is very good, the woman said. Debbie froze. She slowly raised her face. The sunglasses and mask felt useless. The woman smiled cynically, looking straight into Debbie's eyes. I know you're not Mrs. Sanders. You're Debbie, right? Andrew's beloved wife. Debbie's heart felt like it dropped. She was caught. The whole plan she had put together fell apart in an instant. She was frozen in her chair, unable to speak. How did this woman know? Her face was covered by a mask and sunglasses. She could only stare at the woman in front of her with a look of shock. The woman, Tabitha, pulled out the chair in front of Debbie and sat down calmly. She placed her bag on the table as if nothing had happened. Just relax, she said. Her voice was no longer as sharp as on the phone, but still cold. I'm not going to scream. I already suspected Mrs. Sanders wouldn't dare come herself after her call was disconnected this morning. Who are you? Debbie finally managed to get her voice out, though it sounded trembling and hoarse. My name is Tabitha. I am your late husband's business partner. Tabitha answered bluntly. She signaled to a waiter and ordered a black coffee without sugar. Business partner? Debbie frowned. As far as she knew, Andrew managed the real estate company alone after his father died. Mrs. Sanders only sat on the board of directors without much involvement. Tabitha seemed to be able to read Debbie's mind. Not in the main company. We had our own project. The coastal project you read about in that transfer proof, she said with a thin smile. Andrew was brilliant, but he didn't trust his own mother. He knew his mother was corrupt, so he built this project outside of Mrs. Sanders's knowledge, and I was his partner. A 50-50 investment. Debbie became even more confused. Then that message, hush money, the accident, Andrew. The waiter came to deliver Tabitha's coffee. Tabitha waited for the waiter to leave before continuing. She sipped her coffee a little. After Andrew died, she continued, her eyes now looking at Debbie seriously, your greedy mother-in-law immediately took over everything. She found our project documents. She thought she could just take my share. Of course, I wouldn't stay silent. Tabitha leaned her body forward. That message wasn't blackmail, Debbie. It was an invoice. The money you saw in that transfer proof was my money, my right, my share of the project profits that Mrs. Sanders tried to seize. But the accident? Debbie urged. Tabitha's expression turned hard. Her cynical smile vanished, replaced by a faint flash of anger. I used that word to pressure her. At first, I was just suspicious. Andrew's death was too sudden, too clean. Break failure sounds like a cheap movie trope. Tabitha fell silent for a moment, her eyes staring off. Andrew couldn't have died from an accident, Debbie. Your husband was a very meticulous person. He would never have let his car be in bad condition. He was murdered. Murdered? The word came out of Debbie's mouth like a whisper full of horror. Yes, Tabitha asserted, and Mrs. Sanders is the mastermind. I'm sure she planned it all. Why else would she be so panicked and immediately pay me as soon as I mentioned the word accident? She thinks I know something. She thinks I have proof, even though initially I was just bluffing. Debbie felt nauseous. Andrew's mother, killing her own son, impossible. For what? Wealth? Not just wealth, Tabitha said. Andrew knew. The day before he died, he called me. He said he had just found strong evidence that his mother was committing massive embezzlement in the main company. millions of dollars in corruption. Andrew said he was going to report his mother to the police. And the next day, he was dead. Debbie's world felt like it was spinning. So Andrew was killed to silence him, and the killer was his own mother. Debbie's tears flowed uncontrollably, not tears of grief, but tears of burning anger. Tabitha let Debbie cry for a moment. She didn't try to comfort her. She just waited. "Why are you telling me all this?" Debbie asked while wiping her tears. "Because we have the same enemy," Tabitha answered quickly. "I hate Mrs. Sanders because she killed my business partner and stole my money. You should hate her because she killed your husband and destroyed your life." Tabitha looked Debbie straight in the eyes. "I want my money back, all of it. And I want Mrs. Sanders to rot in prison. You want justice for Andrew, right?" Debbie nodded slowly. Her fear was gone, replaced by cold determination. "Help me destroy her," Tabitha said, "and I will help you prove that Andrew was murdered." Debbie looked at Tabitha. This woman was cold, calculating, and clearly dangerous. She was not a friend. She was a poisonous ally. But at this moment, she was Debbie's only hope. "How do I know I can trust you?" Tabitha wasn't offended. She even smiled. "I knew you would ask that." She reached into her handbag and took out a small silver flash drive. She pushed it slowly across the table toward Debbie. The object felt cold under Debbie's gaze. "What is this?" "I didn't come with just bluffs," Tabitha said. "I hacked the security system of the auto shop where Andrew's car was serviced the day before he died. Mrs. Sanders said it was a routine service, right?" "Lie." Tabitha leaned her body forward once more. "That is the CCTV footage from the shop that night. See who came to meet the mechanic after closing time. After you see it, you'll know I'm not playing around. You'll know who is truly dirty here." Tabitha stood up from her chair and straightened her blouse. "Contact me after you're ready. Don't use Mrs. Sanders's phone anymore. She must be panicking now. Use your own number. My number is on that flash drive." Tabitha turned and walked away. Her steps remained graceful and full of confidence. She disappeared among the lobby crowd, leaving Debbie staring at the silver flash drive on the table. That small object now felt very heavy, as if it held all the darkness that had taken Andrew's life. Debbie sat in the hotel lobby for a while. The silver flash drive felt cold and heavy in her sweaty palm. Tabitha was gone, leaving Debbie alone with a time bomb. CCTV footage, proof. Her heart was still pounding, no longer from fear of Tabitha, but from the terrifying anticipation of what she would see. She had to get home immediately. She had to see the contents of this flash drive. She stood up with legs that felt a little shaky, straightened her headscarf, and walked quickly out of the hotel lobby. She didn't want to waste a single second. The taxi ride home felt like the longest torture of her life. She sat in the back seat, clutching her bag tight. Mrs. Sanders's phone was inside, set to silent mode. Debbie kept looking out the window. Every car driving beside her felt like a threat. She was paranoid. She wondered if Tabitha could be trusted. What if this was all a trap? But Tabitha's cold voice, full of conviction, and her clear hatred for Mrs. Sanders felt real. They had both lost. Tabitha lost money and a business partner. Debbie lost her husband and her entire world. Finally, the taxi stopped in front of her gate. Debbie paid quickly and rushed inside, locking the gate and the front door behind her. The house felt silent, too silent. She leaned against the door for a moment, catching her breath. She was safe, at least for now. She didn't turn on the living room lights. She ran toward Andrew's office on the second floor. That room was the one place she rarely entered since Andrew died. There were too many memories. The smell of coffee and paper typical of her husband still lingered. Debbie turned on the laptop on Andrew's desk. The light from the screen was the only illumination in the dim room. Her hands trembled violently as she inserted the silver flash drive into the USB port. Her heart was pounding so loud she could hear it in her own ears. A folder appeared on the screen. It contained only one video file. The file name was a series of numbers, date and time. The date was one day before Andrew died. The time showed 11 p.m. Debbie double-clicked. The video opened. The quality wasn't good. Black and white, a bit blurry, and taken from a high angle. It was footage from inside an auto shop. Debbie could see her husband's car, a black sedan she recognized well, parked in the middle of the room. A man in a mechanic's uniform was leaning over the front of the car, in the engine area. The shop should have been closed hours ago. Debbie held her breath. She fast-forwarded the video a bit. Nothing happened for a few minutes, just the mechanic looking busy working under the open hood. Then a door on the side of the shop opened. A second figure entered the recording. This figure was taller than the mechanic. He was wearing a jacket and a hat, making his face difficult to see clearly. The figure walked toward Andrew's car. He spoke with the mechanic, pointing toward the engine. The mechanic nodded. Then, the jacketed figure reached into his pocket and took something out, a thick brown envelope. He handed it to the mechanic. The mechanic took it quickly and put it in his pants pocket. Debbie's heart felt like it stopped. This was a transaction. This was a payment. The jacketed figure patted the mechanic on the shoulder. He then turned to leave. Just as he turned, he looked up slightly, as if checking the CCTV camera in the corner of the room. Only for a second. But that second was enough. The light from the shop's neon lamps fell right on his face, which was no longer hidden by the shadow of the hat. Debbie let out a stifled cry. She pressed the pause button. She enlarged the image on the screen. It wasn't Mrs. Sanders. She recognized that face. She had seen that face almost every day for years. She had even just seen him a few hours ago, sitting behind the wheel of the car that took Mrs. Sanders away from this house. It was Jim, Mrs. Sanders' private driver, the quiet, polite man who always bowed respectfully. Debbie's whole body went cold. The betrayal was so deep and dark. Mrs. Sanders didn't dirty her own hands. She used her trusted person, her most loyal pawn, to do the dirty work. Jim, who always smiled kindly at Andrew. Jim, who helped carry her husband's casket at the funeral. Debbie felt nauseous. She covered her mouth, holding back the urge to vomit. So this was the truth. A neat conspiracy. Mrs. Sanders was the brain. Jim was the executor. Debbie sat weakly in Andrew's office chair. She stared at the screen displaying Jim's frozen face. The truth she saw turned out to be worse than she imagined. Suddenly, the silence in the house was broken. The doorbell rang, not just once, but many times, pressed forcefully, repeatedly, and full of anger. Debbie jumped from her chair. She ran to the bedroom window, peeking down. On the front porch, under the dim porch light, stood Mrs. Sanders. Her face was no longer sweet or restless. Her face was pale, filled with panic and unconcealed anger. Debbie froze in place. Mrs. Sanders was at the door. Pure panic ran through her. Her mother-in-law must have realized her phone wasn't in her bag or in the car. She must have searched for it everywhere. And now she was back at the last place she had been. This house. The bell rang again, louder and longer. Behind Mrs. Sanders, parked at the gate, Debbie could see the silhouette of the black sedan. Jim must be inside that car. The killer was outside her gate. Debbie's heart raced. She had to think fast. She couldn't look panicked. She couldn't let Mrs. Sanders know that she knew. She looked at the laptop on the table. The video recording of Jim was still displayed on the screen. With trembling hands, Debbie immediately unplugged the flash drive and put it into her deep dress pocket. She closed the laptop. Then, Mrs. Sanders's phone. It was still inside her bag. She couldn't let Mrs. Sanders see it. She ran down the stairs. The bell kept ringing incessantly. "One moment," Debbie shouted, trying to make her voice sound normal, perhaps a little sleepy, as if she had just woken up. She arrived in the living room. With a quick movement, she took Mrs. Sanders's phone out of her bag. She didn't have time to hide it in a complicated place. She tucked the phone deep into the crack between the sofa cushions where Mrs. Sanders had sat earlier, deep enough so it wouldn't be seen unless searched for intentionally. Debbie took a deep breath. She straightened her headscarf. She had to be calm. She was a grieving wife, not an investigator who had just found evidence of murder. She walked to the door and opened it. "Mother?" Debbie said, pretending to be surprised. "What is it? Coming here so late? Did you leave something behind?" Mrs. Sanders's face was tense. Her sharp eyes immediately scanned the inside of the house, past Debbie's shoulder. She didn't answer Debbie's question. Instead, she stepped inside, pushing Debbie slightly to the side. "My phone. I left it here," she said in a blaming tone. Her voice was no longer sweet, but sharp and demanding. "Oh, really?" Debbie said, closing the door slowly. "Where, Mother? I went straight to the kitchen after you left. I haven't had a chance to clean up yet." Debbie kept her voice flat. Mrs. Sanders didn't pay attention to her. She went straight to the sofa. She lifted every cushion. She threw them onto the floor. Her eyes were wild. She bent down, looking under the sofa, then under the coffee table. She felt around the carpet. "I put it here, right here," she hissed, more to herself than to Debbie. She looked at the pile of cushions on the floor with frustration. "Maybe it fell in the car, Mother," Debbie suggested softly. Mrs. Sanders turned quickly. Her gaze pierced Debbie. "It's not in the car. Jim already tore the whole car apart. It must be here." There was a tense pause. Mrs. Sanders looked at Debbie from head to toe. Suspicion radiated clearly from her face. "You didn't see it?" she asked. Her voice now dropped to a dangerous whisper. Debbie shook her head. "No, Mother, I didn't see anything." Mrs. Sanders stepped forward, approaching Debbie. The distance between them was now very close. Debbie could smell the expensive perfume mixed with the scent of sweat, a sign of panic. "Don't lie, Debbie. You're hiding it, aren't you?" It was a direct accusation. Debbie felt a cold anger rise from within her, overcoming her fear. She stared back into her mother-in-law's eyes. "Mother," Debbie said. Her voice was calm but firm, much different from the submissive daughter-in-law's voice until now. "You're accusing me of taking your phone?" I don't know where your phone is, but if you insist on accusing me, go ahead. Feel free to search this house as much as you want. Search my room, search my bag, search me too if necessary." Debbie spread her arms slightly. "But after you find nothing, I hope you remember that you are in your late son's house." It was a bold bluff. Debbie wagered everything on the belief that Mrs. Sanders would not dare search her. It would be an open declaration of war. Mrs. Sanders's face turned bright red. She was cornered. She thought Debbie wasn't lying. If Debbie were really hiding it, she wouldn't be this calm. But her panic over losing the phone was much greater. That phone contained everything. The conversation with Tabitha, the transfer proof, and perhaps more. Mrs. Sanders stared at Debbie with full hatred. She knew she lost this round. She couldn't force it. Maybe I was wrong," Mrs. Sanders said, her voice trembling with anger. "Maybe it was left at the office this afternoon." It was a weak excuse, and they both knew it. Without saying anything else, Mrs. Sanders turned sharply. She walked quickly to the door, opened it loudly, and went out. She slammed the door behind her, making the framed photo of Andrew on the wall vibrate. Debbie leaned against the closed door. Her legs were weak. She succeeded, for now. She waited a few seconds until she heard Mrs. Sanders's car drive away from the gate. She locked the door, letting out a long, trembling breath. She went back to the sofa and reached into the cushion crack. Her hand touched the cold surface of the phone. She pulled it out. She stared at the object. This object was her weapon. Debbie knew Mrs. Sanders would not give up. She would return, or she would send someone else. She would send Jim. Debbie had to move faster. She turned on Mrs. Sanders's phone. She had to find more. She had to find evidence linking Mrs. Sanders directly to Jim. She opened the email app. She checked the inbox. Empty. Sent folder. Empty. Mrs. Sanders was very clean. Then Debbie remembered something. She opened the drafts folder. There was one email there, not yet sent, addressed to a contact saved as J. Debbie knew it must be Jim. The email subject was empty. Debbie opened the draft. Her heart felt like it stopped for the umpteenth time that night. The message was short, but its content made her blood freeze. She is suspicious. She knows about the phone. Get rid of her. Make it look like a robbery. The breath caught in her throat. Get rid of her. Make it look like a robbery. That sentence was a death sentence, written so coldly, as if ordering goods. Her heart, which had been pounding, now felt like it was being squeezed by an icy hand. Mrs. Sanders wasn't just panicked because of the lost phone. She was panicked because Debbie knew, and for that, Debbie had to die. Just like Andrew, she didn't have much time. Mrs. Sanders might have already called Jim from another number, or Jim might already be on his way here. This house, which used to be her safest refuge, had now become a death trap. She had to leave now. With hands that were trembling so violently they were almost uncontrollable, Debbie took a photo of Mrs. Sanders's phone screen, capturing that terrifying draft email. That image was proof of intent to kill. She immediately put Mrs. Sanders's phone in her pocket, beside the CCTV recording flash drive. She grabbed her sling bag, no longer caring about bringing anything else. Her life was the priority. She ran to the back door, opened it slowly, and peered into the dark backyard. It was silent. She slipped out, jumped over the low side fence, and ran along the quiet residential streets. She didn't dare order a taxi. She kept running under the cover of trees, hiding in the shadows until she arrived at a busy main road. Only there, under the street lights, surrounded by passing vehicles, did she feel she could breathe a little. She stopped in front of a 24-hour convenience store. Her hands were still shaking. She took out her own phone. She had to call the only person who might be able to help her, the only person with the same interest. She opened the file on the flash drive given by Tabitha. As the woman said, there was a text document inside. It contained only one line, a phone number. Debbie dialed the number. It rang twice. Yes? Tabitha's cold voice answered immediately. No small talk. She knew. It's Debbie, she whispered, her voice breaking with panic. Mrs. Sanders, she wants to kill me. She sent a draft email to Jim. Get rid of her. Make it look like a robbery. Silence for a moment on the other end. Debbie was afraid Tabitha would hang up, considering it too big a problem. Where are you now? Tabitha asked, her voice sounding sharper, full of concentration. On the main road near my house. I escaped. Good. Stay in a crowded place. I'll send an address. Take a taxi there now. Don't use a regular rideshare app. Flag down a regular taxi on the street. Make sure you're not followed. Bring Mrs. Sanders's phone. Bring that flash drive. Don't talk to anyone. I'll wait for you in 30 minutes. The call disconnected. A moment later, an address arrived via message. A luxury apartment in the city center. Debbie immediately flagged down a passing taxi and gave the address. Half an hour later, Debbie was inside Tabitha's spacious and minimalist apartment unit. Tabitha opened the door for her. The woman looked calm, wearing silk pajamas, as if this were a normal business meeting and not a life-or-death situation. Sit, Tabitha said, pointing to the sofa. Give me the phone. Debbie handed over Mrs. Sanders's phone. Tabitha took her laptop and several cables. We don't have much time. Mrs. Sanders must have tried to track this phone. I will copy all the data on it. Everything. Tabitha worked quickly and efficiently. She connected the phone to her laptop. Her fingers danced across the keyboard. A program ran on the screen, starting the data cloning process, the progress bar filling up slowly. Tell me about that email, Tabitha said, her eyes not leaving the screen. Debbie told her everything about Mrs. Sanders coming in a panic, her bluff, and finding the draft email in the drafts folder. Tabitha nodded. She panicked. That's good. Panicked people make mistakes. How did you know I would come? Debbie asked. I didn't, Tabitha replied. But I know Mrs. Sanders. She won't let anyone who holds her secret live. You hold her biggest secret, just like Andrew. The progress bar reached 100%. Done, Tabitha muttered. She unplugged the phone and handed it back to Debbie. Now, everything on that phone is on my laptop. Tabitha then took Mrs. Sanders' phone, opened it, and turned it off. She won't be able to track us anymore. Tabitha began opening the newly copied files on her laptop. Gallery, messages, call history, everything Debbie had already seen. But Tabitha was more thorough. She opened the Notes app, File Manager, even searched in hidden system folders. People like Mrs. Sanders, Tabitha said while continuing to work, always have a backup. She doesn't trust the bank completely. She doesn't trust anyone. She found a hidden financial tracking app protected by a password. Tabitha tried a few times. Failed. Andrew's birthday? She asked suddenly. Debbie mentioned the date. Tabitha typed it. Failed. The date Andrew's father died? Debbie mentioned the date. Tabitha typed it. The app opened. It contained not just financial records. It was Mrs. Sanders's secret diary, details of company embezzlement, fictitious names she used, illicit funds flow. All the corruption evidence Andrew found was there. "This is the motive," Debbie whispered, her eyes fixed on the rows of millions of dollars that were embezzled. "Wait," Tabitha said. "There's more." She scrolled down to the oldest records. There was a file attached, a scanned document, the title, Andrew's original will. Debbie's hands shook as Tabitha opened it. It was her husband's will, made a month before he died, signed by Andrew and 2 witnesses. Its content was very clear. If Andrew died, all his personal assets, including 70% of the shares in the main company, fell to his wife Debbie, not his mother. The will Mrs. Sanders showed Debbie after the funeral, stating she was the main heir, was a fake. "She didn't just kill him," Debbie whispered, tears of burning anger blinding her. "She robbed me. She robbed my husband's inheritance." "We have everything now, Debbie," Tabitha said, her eyes shining coldly. "We have the motive, corruption and a fake will. We have proof of the murder plan, the CCTV recording of Jim, and we have proof of the plan to murder you, that draft email." "Let's go to the police," Debbie said. "Not yet," Tabitha said quickly. "Mrs. Sanders is slippery. She can bribe anyone. Digital evidence can be called fake. CCTV footage can be called an edit. A draft email can be said to have never been sent. We need something they can't deny. We need a confession." Tabitha looked at Debbie. "We have to lure them, both of them, Mrs. Sanders and Jim, in the same place, at the same time." Tabitha took the dead phone of Mrs. Sanders. She turned it back on. "Jim is waiting for orders, right? He's waiting for the get rid of her email. That's sent. Mrs. Sanders must be frantically looking for it out there, trying to contact him." Tabitha opened the draft email. She deleted it. "We will send a new message," Tabitha said. She switched to the instant messaging app, opening the conversation with Jay, alias Jim. Tabitha's fingers typed quickly. "The robbery plan failed. She escaped. She knows everything. She will definitely go to the police. Meet me at the old warehouse in the outskirts now. Bring the original footage from the shop. We must destroy everything. Quick." Tabitha pressed the send button. "What is that?" "Original footage from the shop?" Debbie asked, confused. Tabitha smiled thinly. "I made it up. But a guilty person like Jim must be keeping insurance for himself. Just in case Mrs. Sanders betrays him. He must be keeping a copy of that CCTV. And now he will panic and bring it. We will trap them both with their own evidence." The old warehouse in the outskirts was dark and damp. The smell of dust, rust, and stale diesel oil stung the nose. This was one of the first real estate assets Andrew's father bought. It was now neglected and forgotten. Perfect for a trap. Tabitha had arrived earlier, with 2 large-bodied men dressed in all black. They were not police. They were Tabitha's private security team. They moved quickly in the dark, installing small hidden cameras in several corners and sensitive microphones near the main entrance. Debbie sat in Tabitha's car parked across the street, hidden behind a row of junk trucks. Her heart was beating very fast. She wore a dark hooded jacket and a mask, letting her long headscarf stay hidden inside the jacket. She was the bait. "Are you sure about this, Tabitha?" Debbie whispered. "This feels crazy. This is like a scene in a thriller movie." "Very sure." Tabitha answered. Her eyes were focused on the tablet screen, displaying images from the hidden cameras. Jim is a pawn. He is afraid of Mrs. Sanders, but he's more afraid of prison. He will come. And Mrs. Sanders, she's blind now. You have her phone. She doesn't know what's happening. But I'm sure she's also on her way. How do you know? I actually turned her phone back on, Tabitha said casually. Just enough to send this phone's GPS location to her laptop. She must have a tracking app. She'll think you or Jim are here with her phone. She'll come to get it. She won't be able to help herself. Debbie swallowed hard. Tabitha had really thought of everything. She was cold, calculating, and efficient. But at this moment, Debbie was grateful the woman was on her side. 20 minutes passed like forever. Silence. Only the sound of crickets and a wild dog howling in the distance. Then, a beam of car headlights hit the warehouse driveway. A black sedan that Debbie recognized very well. The same car that carried Mrs. Sanders this morning, driven by Jim. The car stopped. The engine was turned off. The driver's door opened. Jim got out. He looked nervous. He looked around in the dark, holding a small laptop bag in his hand. He was exactly as Tabitha predicted. He brought his insurance. Mother? Mrs. Sanders? Jim called out, his voice trembling. Where are you? It's me, Jim. There was no answer. One of Tabitha's security guards signaled from the shadows. This was Debbie's part. Debbie took a deep breath. She opened the car door and stepped out. She walked slowly toward the warehouse gate, where the moonlight hit her. Jim, Debbie called. She made her voice as calm as possible, though inside she was shaking. Jim jumped in surprise. He squinted his eyes. Debbie? What are you doing here? Where's Mrs. Sanders? Mrs. Sanders isn't here, Jim, Debbie said, stepping closer. Jim's face turned pale. He immediately understood. You trapped me. He turned, about to run back to his car. Too late. Tabitha's voice broke the silence. The floodlights from Tabitha's car suddenly turned on, shining directly on Jim, making him blind for a moment. The two security guards had already moved quickly, blocking his path to the car. They were not armed, but their posture alone was intimidating enough. Jim was cornered against the warehouse wall. He held his laptop bag like a shield. Don't do anything to me. I don't know anything. Debbie stepped forward into the circle of light. She took off her mask. Her face was hard with suppressed anger. You're lying, Jim, Debbie said. You were at the shop that night, the night before Andrew died. Jim's eyes widened in horror. I didn't... I have the recording, Debbie interrupted. I have the CCTV footage. You paid the mechanic to sabotage my husband's brakes. Jim collapsed. All the strength in his legs seemed to vanish. He sat on the dirty ground. It wasn't me, he whimpered, tears beginning to flow down his old face. It's not my fault. I was just told to. Told by whom? Tabitha urged, now standing beside Debbie. Mrs. Sanders, Jim screamed hysterically. He was now sobbing. His figure, which used to be polite, was now completely broken. She was the one who told me. She planned everything. She said Andrew was going to report her to the police. She said we would all be destroyed if Andrew wasn't stopped. Jim crawled, clutching Debbie's legs. Forgive me, Debbie. I'm just a driver. I was afraid. She promised me a lot of money. She said it was for my old age. I lapsed. And you were also the one who was going to get rid of me, right? Debbie asked coldly, brushing off Jim's hand. Make it look like a robbery? I haven't done it yet, Jim shrieked. I don't want to. But she threatened me. She said she would frame me if I didn't comply. What's the proof you were ordered? Tabitha asked sharply. This. Jim opened his laptop bag with trembling hands. He took out a different flash drive from the one Tabitha had given. This is a voice recording. I recorded her orders secretly. I also have a copy of the original CCTV from the shop. I kept them just in case. Debbie and Tabitha looked at each other. This was even better than they thought. She said she would destroy the brakes. Jim continued, now hysterically pouring everything out. She said just to cause an accident, not to kill him. But it turned out, oh God, she told me, she's the mastermind. Just as Jim shouted the last sentence, pointing into the empty air as if Mrs. Sanders were there, a very loud screech of car tires broke the night. A silver Mercedes stopped abruptly at the driveway, blocking the only way out. The car door opened. Mrs. Sanders jumped out. Her face was pale, her eyes wild. She must have tracked her phone to this location. She arrived just in time, right on time to see Debbie and Tabitha standing under the floodlights, right on time to see two large men in black suits, and right on time to see Jim, her trusted driver, sitting there, pointing straight at her while shouting, "She's the mastermind. Mrs. Sanders told me to kill Andrew." The world seemed to stop spinning in that old warehouse. Jim's hysterical voice still echoed in the air. "She's the mastermind. Mrs. Sanders told me to kill Andrew." Mrs. Sanders stood stiffly beside her open car door. Her face, hit by the floodlights of Tabitha's car, looked like a cracked porcelain mask. Her eyes widened in disbelief. She saw Jim, her loyal driver of 20 years, sitting there, pointing her out as a killer. She saw Debbie, her supposedly weak and gentle daughter-in-law, standing tall with eyes burning bright. And she saw Tabitha, the woman she hated, standing there with a thin smile of victory. Mrs. Sanders's panic, which had overflowed from tracking her phone, now turned into terror. She had entered a perfect trap. "Liar!" Mrs. Sanders shrieked, her voice high and piercing, breaking the silence. "You're all lying. You're framing me. Jim, you're crazy. What did they promise you, huh?" Mrs. Sanders stepped forward, trying to show her authoritative side. She pointed at Debbie. "And you, Debbie, you ungrateful child. You're accusing your own mother-in-law. You're the one who stole my phone. You're the one who planned this all." "Enough, Mother." Debbie's voice sounded loud and clear, stopping Mrs. Sanders's steps. There was no longer a tremor in her voice. There was only cold anger. "I stole. What about you? You didn't just steal a phone. You stole my husband's company." Mrs. Sanders's face turned pale. "What do you mean?" "The will," Debbie said. "Andrew's original will, which states I am the sole heir, not the fake will you handed me while I was still grieving." The blow landed. Mrs. Sanders stumbled back a step. She didn't expect Debbie would know about that. It was her deepest secret, besides the murder itself. You have no proof," she hissed, but her voice was no longer as confident as before. "We have everything," Tabitha said, stepping forward. She held a phone connected to a small portable loudspeaker. "We have proof you embezzled company money. We have the CTV recording of Jim at the shop. We have your draft email ordering the murder of Debbie. And we have a direct confession from Jim." "It's all slander," Mrs. Sanders screamed. Jim is lying. He's the one who killed Andrew. He was greedy. He tried to blackmail me." Jim shook his head on the ground. "No, Mother. You were the one who told me. I have the proof." "Shut your mouth, traitor," Mrs. Sanders roared. "The proof is indeed here," Tabitha said calmly. She pressed a button on her phone. A voice was heard, filling the damp warehouse. That voice was not Tabitha's, not Debbie's, and not Jim's. It was Mrs. Sanders's own voice. The recording was slightly hissing but very clear, recorded secretly by Jim. Mrs. Sanders's voice. "I don't care how you do it, Jim. Break failure, a blowout, whatever. Make it look like a pure accident. That boy has crossed the line. He wants to report me. He wants to destroy my life. You handle him." Jim's voice. "But Mother, this is Andrew." Mrs. Sanders's voice. "He's not my son anymore. He's my enemy. Just do it, or I'll be the one to destroy you." The recording stopped. The silence that followed was more deafening than any scream. Mrs. Sanders froze in place. She had just heard her own voice delivering a death sentence for her son. All her masks were shattered. That arrogant face collapsed. Her wild eyes were now filled with pure hatred and madness. She had lost. "Yes," she screamed, a confession exploding from within her rotting soul. "Yes, I was the one who told him. So what?" She pointed at Debbie with a trembling finger. "This is all because of you. Before you came, Andrew always listened. He was a good son, but you poisoned him. You made him turn against me." "He turned against you because you were corrupt," Debbie shot back. "He turned against you because you are a thief." "He was an ungrateful son," Mrs. Sanders roared. "He chose you and your fake honesty over his own mother. He deserved to die. He deserved that. And you—" Mrs. Sanders' eyes blazed. She lunged forward toward Debbie. "You also deserve to die." But she never reached Debbie. Tabitha's 2 security guards moved at lightning speed. They caught Mrs. Sanders, holding her arms behind her back. Mrs. Sanders struggled, screamed, and spat at them. She no longer looked like a respectable socialite. She looked like a cornered wild animal. In the middle of all that chaos, in the middle of Mrs. Sanders's hysterical screams, another sound was heard. A sound coming from a distance but getting clearer. The sound of police sirens. Mrs. Sanders stopped struggling. She turned toward the driveway, her eyes widened in horror. Tabitha smiled thinly. She put her phone back in her pocket. "I called them 30 minutes ago, just before I sent that trap message to Jim." Tabitha stared at Mrs. Sanders, who was now limp in the security guard's grasp. "Your game is over, Mrs. Sanders." Within minutes, the quiet old warehouse was bathed in blue and red light from police rotators. Several patrol cars and a forensic team car blocked the entire entrance. Uniformed police moved quickly and organized. Mrs. Sanders no longer resisted. She stood still, her face pale and empty, as a female police officer handcuffed her behind her back. She knew this was the end. Jim, on the other hand, looked a little relieved. He surrendered himself submissively, his hands extended to be handcuffed, as if the heaviest burden in the world had just been lifted from his shoulders. He kept whispering, "I will cooperate, officer. I will tell you everything." A man in a neat suit, who turned out to be Tabitha's lawyer, immediately approached the lead detective. Tabitha calmly handed over a bag containing evidence. "In here," she said in a clear and professional voice. is the complete cloned data from the suspect's phone, containing proof of corruption, the murder plan, and the original will. There are 2 flash drives containing CCTV recordings from the auto shop. There is another flash drive containing the audio recording of the murder order. And everything that happened tonight in this warehouse, including the suspect's full confession, has been recorded by our cameras. The detective looked at Tabitha, then at Debbie, then at Mrs. Sanders being led into the police car. He nodded briefly. We will secure everything. Debbie watched the police car carrying Mrs. Sanders disappear around the corner. Her body, which had been tense all along, finally slumped. Her legs felt weak. If Tabitha hadn't held her, she might have fallen. This long night was finally over. The legal process moved quickly. The case became a national headline. A socialite mother kills her own biological son to cover up corruption and seize an inheritance. The evidence presented in court was so solid it couldn't be denied. Mrs. Sanders's voice recording, giving the order to Jim, became the key evidence, along with Jim's full testimony as he tried to atone for his mistakes and the draft email proving Mrs. Sanders's intent to kill Debbie. The court delivered the verdict. Mrs. Sanders was found guilty of premeditated murder of Andrew, attempted murder of Debbie, corruption, and document forgery. She was sentenced to life in prison. All her personal assets proven to be from corruption proceeds were seized by the state. Jim, because of his cooperation as a key witness, received a lighter sentence, but still had to spend over a decade in prison. Andrew's original will was declared valid by the court. Debbie was legally confirmed as the rightful owner of 70% of the company's shares. Tabitha got her rights back over the coastal project. Their poisonous partnership ended there. Tabitha had gotten her money and her justice. They parted not as friends, but as 2 people who survived the same storm. 6 months later, Debbie stepped out of the elevator in the main lobby of her company's building. Employees who passed her greeted her respectfully. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Debbie," she replied with a friendly but authoritative smile. Her neat headscarf and elegant work clothes radiated a new aura of self-confidence. She was no longer the fragile, grieving Debbie. She was a leader. She got into her car and drove herself. Her destination was not the office or home. She stopped at a neatly maintained public cemetery. She walked slowly among the headstones, carrying a bunch of white lilies, Andrew's favorite. She stopped in front of a simple black marble headstone with the name Andrew First engraved on it. Debbie crouched down, cleaned a bit of dust from the stone, and placed the flowers. She didn't cry. She stared at her husband's name with a soft and peaceful smile. "Rest in peace, Andrew," she whispered softly. "Everything is finished. Justice has come for you." She fell silent for a moment, letting the evening wind blow the edges of her headscarf. "I know it was hard. I know about your mother. Let it go." She took a breath. "But I want you to know, your company is safe in my hands. I've cleaned it all up, Andrew. I'm running it with honesty, just as you always wanted. Now you can sleep peacefully." Debbie touched the stone once more. The pain of loss was still there, like a faint scar, but it no longer controlled her. She had found peace in justice. She stood up. She no longer looked back. She turned, straightened her headscarf, and walked with firm steps leaving the cemetery. She walked tall, welcoming her new future that she had to live alone, with the strength she found from the truth. 3 years have passed since the day the truth, buried in lies and greed, was finally revealed in that damp old warehouse. 3 years is a long time, long enough to turn grief into memories, turn ruins into a new foundation, and long enough for karma to collect its debt. The face of the city had changed much, as had the nameplate on the skyscraper that used to be Mrs. Sanders's pride. The building was no longer named Sanders Corp. This morning, the sun reflected off strong and elegant steel letters. Andrew Group. That name was Debbie's choice, a tribute, not to the family that had betrayed her, but to the only Andrew who mattered. In the main boardroom on the 40th floor, Debbie, now 32 years old, stood before the board of directors. Her navy blue headscarf matching the modern blazer she wore radiated a calm aura of authority. She was no longer the fragile young woman lost in grief. She was a president and CEO. Her gaze was sharp, her voice clear and full of conviction as she presented the last quarter's report. And thus, she said, changing the presentation slide to a picture of a lush and modern housing complex. All net profits from this quarter, as we have agreed, will be fully allocated for the second phase of the Andrew First Foundation Home Project, subsidized housing for low-income families. This was my late husband's vision, and it will be the main pillar of our company, building with a conscience. The board members, most of whom were new faces she brought in to replace Mrs. Sanders's old cronies, applauded. They respected her not only because she was the majority shareholder, but because she had proven her ability. In 3 years, Debbie had cleaned the company of corrupt practices, paid off hidden debts, and returned it to a path of honest profitability. She was the antithesis of Mrs. Sanders in every way. After the meeting ended, she went back to her office. The room that used to be mega and cold under Mrs. Sanders now felt warm. There were large bookshelves, several calligraphy paintings, and a photo of Andrew smiling on her desk. It was no longer the photo she saw on Mrs. Sanders's phone, but their wedding photo. She stared at the photo for a moment. The pain that used to pierce her heart every time she saw that face had now changed, turning into a soft longing, gratitude, and peace. She had given her husband the justice he deserved. At the same time, hundreds of miles away, in a cramped cell in a women's correctional facility, life went very differently. Mrs. Sanders, now in her late 50s, no longer wore diamond jewelry or silk clothes. She wore a dull, faded blue prisoner's uniform. Her hair, which used to be perfectly styled, was now white and left thin and loose, tied simply. She sat on the edge of her iron bed, staring at the moldy wall. She never regretted. In her mind, twisted by pride, she was not a criminal. She was a victim of an ungrateful daughter-in-law, a victim of a stupid driver who betrayed her, a victim of Tabitha, and most painfully, a victim of her own son whom she considered ungrateful. Her appeal requests had been rejected many times. Her lawyer had long since stopped visiting her. Her seized assets had been auctioned by the state. She had nothing left, no power, no money, no family. Today was visiting day, but no one ever came to visit her, not once in these 3 years. She was alone. Karma for her was not just prison walls. Karma for her was losing status, losing control, and being forgotten. She, who used to live to be seen and feared, was now not seen at all. She was a ghost, living in a grave she dug herself. She took a piece of paper and a pen, starting her 20th letter to the president, asking for clemency. She wrote about how she was framed. Her hand shook not because of age, but because of an anger that never faded. Fate was different for Jim. In a men's prison, he accepted his 15-year sentence submissively. His full cooperation in court had saved him from a life sentence. He was a model prisoner. He spent his days in the prison's craft workshop, teaching other inmates how to carve. He became more religious, never missing a prayer. He knew he couldn't bring back Andrew's life, a young man who used to often give him extra money, but he tried to atone for it in silence. Debbie, through the Andrew First Foundation she had recently established, had unknowingly donated funds for vocational training programs in that prison. The wheel of fate turns in strange ways. And Tabitha, that woman disappeared as quickly as she came. She got all her money back from the Coastal Project, plus large interest. Last heard, she was managing a large investment firm in Singapore. She had won. She was wealthy, successful, and very alone. She lived in a glass penthouse with a glittering city view, exactly as she always wanted. Sometimes, while drinking her expensive wine, she remembered Debbie, not with warmth, but with cold respect. She considered Debbie the only person on par with her, someone who succeeded in turning tragedy into strength. But she never contacted her again. That night, Debbie returned to her home, the house that was once a silent witness to the discovery of that phone. The house no longer felt haunted or sad. She had renovated it. The walls were now painted in bright colors. Her backyard, once neglected, was now full of roses and jasmine. She sat on the back porch, drinking warm tea while staring at the stars. Her phone rang. It was no longer Mrs. Sanders's phone holding dark secrets, but her own phone. A calendar reminder appeared on the screen. Andrew's birthday. Debbie smiled. 3 years ago, this day would have been a day full of tears. Tonight, she only felt peace. She no longer needed to visit his grave as often as before. She no longer needed to prove anything. She had found the truth. She had obtained justice. And in the process, she didn't just save her husband's legacy. She also found herself. She found her voice, her strength, and her purpose. Mrs. Sanders had taken Andrew's life, but she failed to take Debbie's future. Debbie closed her eyes, inhaling the scent of jasmine in the night air. She knew her journey was still long. Running a large company alone was not easy. But she was no longer afraid. She had faced the deepest darkness in her life and succeeded in walking out carrying the light. She had made peace with the past, and now she was ready for whatever the future would bring. She lived, and that was the best justice of all.